Hey guys, Alex the Punch Doctor here, and today I want to look at Alex Pereira and how he generates his scary knockout power and makes it look almost effortless. I'm going to go over the anatomy, including Alex Pereira's genetic advantages, the kinetic chains that generate power, some analysis of his punches, including his left hook and right hand, and some other interesting things I noticed in the clips as we go on. First, I want to highlight some physical features that offer Alex a big genetic advantage to generating punching power. Alex has long limbs, which act as long levers, giving Alex a big mechanical advantage. It takes less effort to create force and speed with long levers. It's a force amplifier. He also has good shoulder integrity. You'll see in the clips that there's not a lot of movement in his shoulder joint at impact. Some guys have looser joints that move at impact like a shock absorber. Alex puts virtually all the power he generates into his target, and you'll see this in the clips. He's not built like a bodybuilder. No big show-off muscles, just muscles with a purpose. Alex also has an athletic hips and core. He has good muscle balance here, which is an indicator of athleticism. He has good glute development, which contribute to his core stability, hip extension, and hip rotation, which is necessary to power the punch. When I get to the clips, you're going to see Alex use hip rotation to power his punches. He throws the punch in a series of movements and uses his entire body to power the punch. Now, the punch is not a linear or straight line movement like many coaches and YouTube instruction shows. That's just not how you generate power, and it's not how natural punchers actually punch. You've probably heard that punches are born, not made, or that you can't teach punching power. This is because nobody has figured out how to describe what these natural punchers do, and they don't have a way to teach it. I'm going to take away the mystery, peel back the curtain, and explain it all to you right now. And in the end, I'm going to show you how you can learn how to do this yourself too. Now, I've broken the punch down into 4 phases: load, explode, accelerate, and follow through. The punch starts with a loading of elastic muscle energy into the hips, either through movement or a lowering of your center of gravity. The hips then explode into rotation, creating a cascade of accelerating movement through your kinetic chains until impact, and then a follow through where you transfer your weight through your opponent. Every stage is very important. However, the big key behind generating punching power is the initial hip loading and cascade of accelerating movement. This cascade is powered by a phenomenon called the stretch shortening cycle. The stretch shortening cycle is a cycle of quick stretch which loads elastic muscle energy into the muscle, and then a release of this loaded elastic muscle energy with a very rapid contraction. It's the same thing you do when you dip down quickly before you jump up for more spring, or bounce the weight off your chest in a heavy bench press to get a bit more power. This can occur in every joint. All you need is a stretch and a contraction, and rotating the hips sets things in motion. This is how you use your kinetic chains to power your punch. And it's not just one singular kinetic chain, it's multiple kinetic chains. The punch first starts with a rapid hip rotation. This creates torque, or rotational force. This rotation stretches the crossbody kinetic chains, including the spiral line, which includes the internal obliques in yellow and the external obliques in orange. The external oblique links up with the serratus interior and travels into the shoulder blade. In blue, you see the abs and pec, which connect to form the front functional line. This line is stretched at the same time, and this includes the pec, which of course crosses the shoulder joint. When these muscles stretch quickly, they're loaded with elastic muscle energy that can then be released in a burst with a rapid contraction, right? The stretch primes it for a contraction, just like when you dip down to jump or you let the weight come down and then bounce it off your chest. This stretch response happens in the hips to start the punch, and it creates a cascade of stretch contractions through the torso and into the arm. To summarize, the hips rotate, create a stretch in the chains that connect the hips and the torso. These chains then quickly contract to power the body into rotation. A stretch contraction also occurs between the chest and the arm. Sometimes the stretch here occurs when you lower your center of gravity to explode with that initial hip rotation, or it will occur with a slight lag of the arm behind the torso in the series of movements. Either way, the hip powers the torso, which powers the arm, creating a chain of stretch contractions from the hips up in a series of events, not all at one time like a lot of coaches and YouTube instruction shows. Now, with Alex's right hand, the same principles apply. Hips rotate, crossbody chains are stretched, they contract, and a stretch contraction then continues up the chain between the chest and the arm and in the arm until impact. Let's get into the clips. The first fight I want to show you is the fight I was showing you in the intro, which is Alex Pereira versus Thomas Powell. So same thing I'm going to go over here. You're going to see Alex lower his center of gravity. Now this is pretty obvious. You might not want to do it this way. However, he lowers his center of gravity here. And then immediately, so he's loading the elastic properties of the muscle, right? He's stretching the muscle quickly and then contracting it very quickly as well. Now, one thing you can see is that when he's lowering his center of gravity, his torso is moving back relative to his hips. So it's already loading. He's loaded those tissues as he lowers his center of gravity, which I talked about before. So his weight's coming down and he's loading those tissues simultaneously. And then when he rotates his hips, all they need to do is contract because they're already loaded. So while he's lowering his center of gravity, he's loading those cross-body chains. You can see his torso coming back here, and you'll see it again later in a better view. However, his torso comes back while he lowers his center of gravity, and he's able to contract all of his chains off the hip rotation that comes afterwards. Here's another view, and you'll see here a little bit better of hip rotation. And you'll see that the hips rotate before the torso does. The hips are already going forward here, rotation, and the torso is also coming back here. When his weight is coming down, his center of gravity is coming down, his torso is coming back relative to his hips. And that's already putting a stretch into the chains, which he can then contract off of. So then everything starts rotating, the arm's coming behind. It picks up that tension because you'll see his torso rotating to the right here while his arm is coming back, increasing the stretch between his arm and his torso. And then it just follows the torso. It picks up that tension in the superficial front arm line and in the front functional line. There's an impact, and then Alex's weight goes forward through the punch. And it's just a couple frames here, but it's enough to add weight and stability. You see that follow? See that weight transfer? It's subtle. However, you can see that his body goes with the punch, with his fist, through his opponent. Here's another example of a very powerful left hook against Donegi Abena. So you're going to see some similar scenario at play here. You're going to see Alex's weight come down, and his arm is coming back while his weight's coming down, his center of gravity. Once his center of gravity comes down, it immediately explodes into rotation while his arm is coming back, which is, of course, stretching those cross-body chains, including the spiral line with the obliques into the serratus into the shoulder blade, and the front functional line, which goes from the pelvis to the abs to the pec, and, of course, into the arm. Explodes into rotation, the arm's coming back, increasing the stretch. It picks up the tension right about here, and then everything accelerates. Accelerates until impact, and then goes through his opponent with a big follow through. I'll show you another view too. One more view, you can see his left arm a little bit better. Weight comes down, that arm is coming back, hip comes forward. As that arm is coming back, naturally all those chains between his hip and his arm are being stretched. It picks up the tension, contracts, impact, follow through. I want to show you this clip of Alex Pereira against Sean Strickland. We'll watch it in slow-mo first, and then I'll back it up. I want to show you something interesting that Alex does, which he's done consistently in these clips, which is preload his cross-body chains. You'll see when his weight comes down, look at his hips, his belt line. He's already stretched and loaded those tissues. I'll show you again. Look at his hips rotate on his way down, stretching those tissues. And he can then explode from that because they're already stretched with a contraction to power his torso into rotation. That arm follows behind, everything is moving. And look at his elbow. It's straight now. And then his bicep contracts to flex the elbow. Everything is moving, right? And that little extra movement adds acceleration and velocity to his fist. As he comes down and those tissues are preloaded, that quick change of direction offers an additional ballistic stretch that he explodes from to power that punch. So while he's already preloaded, he gets a little bit extra with that change of direction. And of course, a knockout occurs due to acceleration of the head. So the brain hits the inside of the skull. A rapid acceleration. And you'll see here a couple follow-up shots, which is quite impressive against a moving target. We'll watch it one more time. You'll see Alex's hips rotating as he's moving down, coiling up like a spring, loading that elastic energy into his muscles, which is then released with a contraction, powering everything into rotation. The elbow bends to add even more acceleration and velocity to his fist. Good impact, good follow through. And that's the beginning of the end. Now, this video wouldn't be complete without the first Prochazka fight. So let's watch this. And we'll take another look in slow-mo. So slip counter here. Alex is moving his weight to his right foot. And you'll see that as the weight comes down, he's going to explode with rotation. There's a few frames here to turn his body with his hips. And his arm, right in these 3 frames, is lagging back. And it picks up the contraction right here. You see how it starts, his right shoulder starts turning forward. And this doesn't look like it lands from this angle. However, it does. And since he's moving his weight from right to left, loading that left leg, he can explode from that too in a similar fashion. Short shots up close. And you'll see Jiri's head move very quickly at the impact. Here comes Jiri's punch. Weight's on Alex's right leg. Look at him lead with the hips. You see that just a few frames there? Leading with the center. Leading with his hips right there, which powers the rest of the movement. Everything else comes behind that. And look at Jiri's head. Bonk. Rapid acceleration right there. And Alex's weight is going to his left foot right here, which then turns into rotation as well. You can't see it, but that arm comes behind it, and there's another impact right there. Puts Jiri down. Let's watch it one more time. Jiri comes in with a lead right. Alex slips. Weight goes to his right leg. And you'll see him lead with his center. His torso follows. His arm follows. Picks up the contraction. His weight comes to his left leg. You can see his arm lag back just slightly as his hips move forward. See that? Arm is lagging back. Now it picks up the contraction after the stretch. And look how quick he moves that arm. It's 2 frames. So it's less than 1/10 of a second. Impact. Short, compact punch. Big shot. Here's another example of the left hook against Ertugrul Bayrak. So you're going to see Alex throw a right hand to the body. And this already puts him in position with his weight on his left leg to explode from this position into rotation. And you'll notice that his body is turned left relative to his hips. And you'll see there's like 3 frames here where his torso is not really moving. It's not rotating yet. And his hips are rotating relative to his torso right there. Now his torso is moving a little bit, but his hips are moving more. And what's that doing? Well, it's creating a stretch between his hips and his torso into those crossbody chains. The spiral line and the front functional line. Creating a stretch in those. Additionally, that arm is lagging back. So you can see his torso start moving away from his arm. increasing the stretch between his arm and his torso. Right there. You see how that elbow is opening up, increasing the stretch there. So his weight is on his left leg. Hips start rotating relative to the torso. Arm comes back a little bit. Then everything starts contracting. And you'll also see that his elbow flexes in these frames. So it's more open right here, and it bends, increasing the acceleration. So remember what I said, load phase, explode, accelerate, follow through. And there's acceleration in all the joints. So the shoulder, his arm is moving forward, so the shoulder is transferring that power. And while that arm is coming forward, the elbow is bending, increasing that acceleration and velocity at impact. I want to bring up an important point about the position of Alex's arm. Now look at where the elbow is relative to his shoulder. It's below the shoulder. So he's not bringing his elbow way up, like in line, in horizontal line with his shoulder. It's below the shoulder. Now, why is this important? Well, it's in a more neutral position. When your shoulder is in a more neutral position, it's in a more stable position because there's more tension in the lats, in the teres major, and your pecs. So by not bringing his elbow up all the way, he's keeping tension in those muscles, and it offers a more stable position for impact. Here's another look at the left hook. Hips start rotating, and you can see them rotate relative to the torso. You see that rotation right there? Torso's largely standing still, and his hips are rotating. And you see that elbow opening up, increasing the stretch, and the arm coming back a little bit relative to the torso, increasing the stretch in the crossbody chain between the pec and the arm. And then that picks up a contraction. Everything is contracting and accelerating, impact, follow through. Let's take a look at this punch against Jamahal Hill, which puts him down. So you're going to see Alex lower his weight right here. He steps on Jamahal's foot, pretty sneaky. And look at his hips. You can see them rotating, right? Rotate forward, and then the arm is coming back to create some stretch between the arm and the torso. The torso starts turning, and the arm comes right behind it. And then once the torso stops moving, the arm continues with that acceleration and the contraction to land. Alex's weight comes down, immediately pushes his hips into rotation. You see them rotating relative to the torso. The arm's coming back, creating some stretch between the arm and the chest. Now the torso starts moving. The arm picks up the contraction. It starts moving. The torso ends. Arm keeps going to follow through. Impact, follow through. Let's take a look at this left hook against Israel Adesanya. So we'll go slow. Look at Alex's weight going to his left leg, and he starts rotating his hips while his torso is bent to the left, creating a ton of torque. We'll watch it again. Weight goes to the left. Hips start turning while his body is bent to the left, creating a ton of torque and a ton of stretch, which he then contracts on. His arm lags behind, picks up the contraction and the tension with a big landing. What I want to do here before I go to Alex's right hands is show you this sequence of Alex against the punch machine. Some of the phases I think might be a little bit challenging to grasp. He does everything very quickly. He's a very athletic guy. And there's not like the real distinct series of movements because they all sort of blend. And I want to go over this in accelerating speed to really show you how he moves. So you're going to see first a loading. He drops his center of gravity right there. And then there's a rotation and everything else follows. and see if you can see that series of movements. Look at his arm lag back, how the hips lead the motion, and it creates like a domino effect. Hips move and everything else goes after that. And hopefully this gives you a good idea as this goes faster what the punch looks like and how he throws it. And we're going close to full speed here. And you can see that cascade. So here I'll slow it down for you. There's a loading right here, lower center of gravity, and then just a couple frames of hip rotation, maybe one or two. Maybe just one. Now his torso is relatively stationary. It's moving to the left, but it's not rotating, and the hip rotates first, right there. And look at his arm lag back slightly. So he's stretching all of those chains at one time with that one movement. Now his hips really rotate and everything starts to contract just in a couple frames, right? Hips rotate further, and everything starts moving. And now it's going to contract. You see that arm pick up the tension. Look at the arm. Picks up the tension and starts moving right there. And look how he lands. His elbow is below his shoulder, which increases stability at impact because it's keeping tension in all those muscles that connect the arm to the body, including the lats, the teres major, and his big pecs. Additionally, you're going to see that he does not accelerate his elbow joint. So his bicep does not bend, and his shoulder really doesn't go forward relative to his torso. It does in some of his other right hands. And I want to mention that what this does, it may reduce velocity at impact because he's missing out on 2 points of acceleration. But what this does is it adds a hard stop to his shoulder. So it's even more of a stable landing. If you go and put your fist against the wall and turn away from it, you can sort of feel that there's eventually a hard-ish stop after your tissues have all compressed back and your arm doesn't want to move any further back because it's limited by all those tissues. And that's the position he's landing in. So he's still creating a ton of torque and acceleration with his hips and torso. He's just landing with more stability than if he was moving his arm relative to his body. In some of the punches I show, you'll see arm acceleration, like relative to the body, including the elbow, which speeds up the velocity of his fist for impact. However, right here, he's landing with more, I believe, more stability. And I think that might be partially responsible for his high number. Right? He might not be creating the maximum acceleration that he can, but he's creating a lot of torque. His body is behind the punch with his weight, and he's got a ton of stability at impact to facilitate a hard, strong punch. Let's look at this right hand from Alex against Bayrak. His weight's coming left, and there's one frame right there where his hip is rotating forward relative to his torso and his arm is coming back. So he's stretching those chains all at once. Weight's coming down, lowering his center of gravity, pushes off, and his hips are moving forward and his arm is coming back. So he's really creating like a slingshot effect. You know, I think more than other guys, because he's loading all those chains with one motion, and then they contract. Big contraction, and you'll see his elbow here also approximates. So he's flexing his elbow, impact. And this is not a knockout punch, it's just an example. But it's a big punch. So to summarize, his weight's coming left. His arm is moving backwards to stretch relative to the body. His pelvis goes forward to really stretch the crossbody kinetic chains, including the ones into the arm. Everything picks up the contraction after that stretch. Very fast, very quick. Impact. And you see how his body moves just after the impact to solidify that weight transfer. Big shot. Here's another right hand from Alex. And you'll see it's the same sequence of movements. So his weight comes down. That hip comes forward right there relative to his torso. His torso is still pretty stationary, but that arm is lagging back a little bit. So right there, all those chains are stretched. And then they contract in a big way. So look at that hip continue to come forward. And then everything contracts. Weight comes down, hip comes forward. All those chains are stretched right now. Because that arm is still lagging back. That torso is still lagging back relative to the hip. I think this is the point where the stretch becomes a contraction. And right there, certainly the arm is picking up that contraction. Hips rotate, keeps rotating. And from here, you see the torso start moving relative to the hips, right? And the arm. So the hips rotate right there. The torso begins to rotate with it. So does the arm. The arm picks up the contraction after the stretch. Hips stop rotating. Torso and the arm continue. Torso stops. Arm continues for the follow through. So it's a chain of events. We'll look at it one more time. Hips, torso, arm. Big shot. I'm going to show you this last clip of Alex versus Yousri Belgaroui. And we'll watch it in slow-mo, and then I'll break it down frame by frame. Alex's weight is coming down. And watch his torso still move left while his hips begin to rotate right there. So his torso is not rotating yet, but his hips are. Now his torso starts rotating. And his arm is still lagging behind. You see that elbow extending? And right here it picks it up and everything starts moving. Then Alex lands with a hard stop, as I mentioned in the punch machine video. And he's landing into Yousri, who's moving towards the punch. So it lands with even more force. One more time. Weight's coming down. Hip starts rotating right about there. Torso starts rotating. Arm starts moving. Impact. Big shot. And we'll watch it once more in slow-mo. Hips, torso, arm. Big shot. Well, that's it, guys. That's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to learn how you can maximize your punching power and use your kinetic chains like Alex Pereira does, check out my program called the Power Punching Blueprint at howtopunchharder.com. I can't give you Alex's genetics, but I can help you maximize your punching power using the 4 phases of the punch, using stretch and contraction, torque and acceleration in an A to Z program that rebuilds your mechanics from the ground up to use these concepts to maximize your own punching power. Check out the program. It's called the Power Punching Blueprint on my website, howtopunchharder.com. Like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.